Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers. This morning I'm looking at a very interesting book from Spiramus Press. It's one that we've reviewed before, and it's TUPE. And as an update of what TUPE is up to at the moment, this is the Transfer of Undertakings Regulations. It's a book by Derbyshire and Stephen Hardy, this one here. Now in a fourth edition, and it's TUPE Law and Practice, and it's a very simple, straightforward guide. That's what's on the back. And you can see it's, again, not a big book, it's 150 odd pages, something like that. What you do have, again, very much in tune now with the way we do things, paragraph numbering at the sides, useful detail on footnotes at the bottom, which is always very helpful to look specifically, for instance, at case law, which is there, and quite a lot of other things that you actually need to have occasionally. Not a particularly big index, as you can see from that, but enough, I think. And what you've got is a very useful glossary of terms, always helpful in this area, because we all remember what the abbreviations are and then we forget suddenly, and it's useful to just have it there. Good use of case law there, and it's always worth reading the preface from the two authors so you get some idea of what this is all about. And then, as I say, when you go into the book itself, you get some idea of the way in which the text is actually laid out. There are various other bits and pieces which I think are important. That actually is the contents page, which gives you some idea of what Professor Hardy and Derbyshire are actually producing here. I've always been very pleased with the Spiramus publications. They're actually very easy to read, and I know that their aim is to try to make things simple for us in what is a difficult area, and they do specialise again in financial legal issues. Now, we've written a review about this fourth edition, and we've given it the title Employers' Interests versus Employees' Rights, TUPE Examined and Explained. And that's exactly what they're doing here. So if you come to this relatively new, you'll have some idea about when there's a transfer of an undertaking. In other words, a company is bought by another company and then the employees all move over to the new company. That basically is where the transfer takes place, and then we have to look at what the rights and obligations are. That in essence then leads us to the regulations, which the European Union love, of course, and it brings us also to the aim to try to safeguard rights where possible for employees. It does also, of course, from my practice I've certainly found this, it does work both ways with the employer, but in essence it's trying to make sure that there's a good deal actually obtained out of it for the employee, and that everybody eventually gets a fair settlement of what happens when one company goes and a new company takes over. So what we say is this: practitioners dealing with matters relating to TUPE will be pleased to know that the latest, now the fourth edition, of TUPE Law and Practice has recently been released by Spiramus Publishing. Even if you don't need reminding, TUPE refers to the Transfer of Undertaking Protection of Employment legislation, okay, TUPE, the purpose of which is to safeguard employees' rights where change in ownership of a business has taken place. And as I've said, that's the background. TUPE, by its very nature, therefore, has always been complex. Aren't they all, unfortunately, when it comes to regulations, but there we are. Now, even more so, of course, given the recent increase in TUPE-related cases, and there is a lot of interesting case law, if that's the sort of area that you practice. Definitely, therefore, the time has come for another edition of this reliable, well-established, and now comprehensively updated guide, especially in the light of the new 2014 TUPE Amendment Regulations, all of which are aimed at clarifying hitherto uncertain issues inherent in TUPE itself and what it's trying to achieve. Additionally, these regulations will benefit employees of small companies and businesses, and I think that's the essence of it, and it's certainly important to have this publication if you do tribunal work. As the two expert authors have pointed out, business transfers are usually aimed at business survival, or ideally business success. In other words, it could be expanding the business or just keeping it going so that the staff don't lose their jobs, if you think about it in that sort of way. On the other hand, of course, employees caught up in such transfers are inevitably concerned with the security of their jobs and the terms and conditions of their employment, which of course could change. Immediately a conflict arises, therefore, between an employer's interests and an employee's contractual rights. This is where the guide comes in, because as an advisory document it's useful for clarifying and explaining the law relating to TUPE and identifying best practice in the area. And again, I think that's helpful when you're looking tactically and advising a client prior to going into a tribunal hearing. The book covers the full spectrum of issues likely to arise in this rather volatile area of law, from employment rights, pensions and insolvency, to contracting out, which again is an important and difficult area in its own right. New material actually included in the publication includes, for example, Regulation 3 with respect to outsourcing and contracting out or in. Again, outsourcing is particularly important at the moment. Also clarified are what are called joint consultation rights and the application of TUPE in cases where the transferor is insolvent. And of course, again, with the economic difficulties we have, that's an important matter for everyone, because the employee is going to be very nervous if the company looks as though it's just about to go under. Now, while the aim of the book is obviously to keep you up to date, the two authors, that's Wyn Derbyshire and Stephen Hardy, note that the European Union has, quote, announced its intention to examine whether another revised directive is required. So we may be going round again with this. Something to watch out for therefore in the distant future, possibly. We hope it's not too distant in some respects, because obviously we've got to keep an eye on what's happening. So let me conclude by saying, in the meantime, we have this book, and if you're a lawyer, not to mention a politician, a policy maker, or anybody involved in this advisory area, this authoritative work will keep you current and well supplied with practical plain English advice. It's useful to note the handy list of further references and websites which are given in the book too, so that's useful for any legal management research you may need to do. And the publication date is stated at the 31st of January 2014. This is the book again. As I say, I'm very pleased with these books because we don't actually have that many books that we feel we can rely on, and these publications by Spiramus Press are ones I do feel are very helpful. And one of the difficulties when you're an advisor professionally is knowing what source to look for, and this is one of them. So thank you to both authors and also to the press for producing an excellent new edition of this work. Bye bye.